Let's start. Sorry, Saad Ahmed. First, I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Ahmed, co-founder and CEO at Padash, a instant food and grocery delivery app. I want to thank you all for taking the time to come here and sit down and listen to us. Hopefully, it's going to be a useful and beneficial panel. I mean, given the knowledge and expertise of our panels, I'm kind of sure it's going to be. Before we start, I want to specifically mention what we're going to talk about, tech startups. I want to define it, what it is and what it isn't, so that we can have a productive panel, and then you can understand the rest of the panel in terms of what we mean when we say tech startup. Because the panel is about funding innovation, investing in tech startups, okay? What is a tech startup? What we mean here is it's not a classic business store that you can see in the city. Not that that's fine. My dad is a store owner. Okay, that's fine. But a tech startup is not that. It's not a restaurant. It's not a marketing agency. It's not a bread store. Or it's not a market, supermarket. That's not a tech startup. It's not handcraft. It's not drop shipping. It's not a Facebook or Instagram page. Those are not tech startups. Those are just normal businesses that are not within that circle that when we mention tech startup. What a tech startup is a business that's based on a tech product. When I say tech product, it means either a mobile app or a website or a tech hardware device like a phone or laptop. That's usually what's referenced to when we say a tech startup. And that's what you use every day. You use your phone, you use Instagram, you use ChatGPT, you use email. Those are all tech and tech products. And businesses have been built on them to make money. And that is what we mean by tech startup. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Thank you so much. And Ustad Mateen, let's start from you. Can you please introduce yourself shortly?
Yeah, thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mateen. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Fair Academy, which is an online learning community where we try to provide all type of learning resources. We're focusing on Kurdish right now, but hopefully we're planning to expand to different language. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Mateen. Rasha?
So I'm Rasha Manna. First of all, I'm very excited to be in Kurdistan for the first time. I'm the general manager of Flat 6 Labs Mashriq. We're an early stage venture capital fund investing in tech and tech-enabled startups. Flat 6 Labs started in Egypt, and we have multiple funds. The fund Iran, which is the Mashriq Fund, invests in Jordan, Palestine, Iraq, including Kurdistan, and Lebanon.
Yeah, actually, full disclosure, Russia invested in my startup a year ago. That's not related to this panel, but it did happen last year. So she does invest in Iraqi and Kurdish startups, which is important for us in this panel. Ustaz Ahmed.
Yeah, Ahmed al-Shagra. I'm a Holair resident, so I'm thrilled to be at HITEX, my first HITEX. I'm Chief Platform Officer and co-founder of 1001. We're an Iraqi media streaming application. And I'm thrilled to be here to talk about startups today.
Ustad Ahmed, I introduced 1001 to people as the Netflix of Iraq. Is that correct? Am I doing a good job? Or?
Well, hopefully we'll be the place that apps like Netflix come to serve Iraqis.
So through you to the Iraqi audience.
That's what we hope to achieve.
All right, understood. Thank you. Dashne?
So this is Dashne Saeed. I am the accelerator manager of Takween Accelerator. We are part of the American University of Iraq Suleimani. We provide services, training, and support to startups all over the country. We're based in Suli, but we provide services to startups all over the country.
All right. Who here has heard of Takween? Can you raise your hand if you've heard of Takween? Wow, you have a good audience.
That's wonderful.
That's nice. All right, the first topic we're going to talk about is why we're here today. Why are we talking about tech startups? Why did Rasha fly from Amman to Erbil today to talk about this topic? Why is it so important? That's what we're going to cover today, okay? So first, I'm going to ask Rasha, who came all the way. Thank you, Rasha. So I want to ask you about the contribution of startups to the Jordanian economy, because that's where you're based. And what is the importance? Why is Flat 6 Labs working on startups, and why is it important for Jordan?
So Amman is only 2 hours away. It's not that far of a flight. But Jordan is we say it's the first entrepreneurship ecosystem in the Middle East. The first tech exit in the region happened out of Jordan when Maktoub was sold to Yahoo in 2009. And then the founders of Maktoub went on to open Souk, to set up Souk. And Souk is one of the largest tech exits in the region when it got sold to Amazon. And then more recently, we had Jawakir get sold. It's a gaming studio. It got acquired by a Swedish company for $264 million. And what happens when you're the first tech ecosystem is it's the most evolved in the region in terms of there being accelerators, angel investors, venture capital, and venture capital that does different stages. Academia is getting involved in terms of helping students from university into entrepreneurship. People who have set up the early successful startups have gone on to become mentors and angel investors. Fadi Ghandour, Aramex, was the first IPO on the Nasdaq from the Middle East. Also the first IPO on the London Stock Exchange was a Jordanian company. So it's quite an evolved ecosystem. We're not as rich as some of the countries around us. So in recent years, countries like Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, of course, beat us in the startup game. But it is a country which has high youth unemployment at 35%. A high percentage of the population is under the age of 35. And so one of the ways to create jobs is to encourage and inspire entrepreneurship. And that's been the main role of it in Jordan, but also as a country that is quite poor in terms of natural resources. We're not one of the countries that has oil in the country. The knowledge economy is core to our industry. And so supporting our youth and our education system and all of the workers that can create, and it's a small market, which is a big challenge in Jordan. We're immediately trying to solve for problems outside of our country.
Exactly.
And tech is something that you're able to do from a country to serve anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, they were targeting Saudi, they were targeting Egypt.
Yes, and we're trying to think of also targeting Africa and internationally as well. Saudi is a very congested market, and there's a lot happening in there. It's actually much harder to get into Saudi than a lot of us anticipate.
What do you think has been the biggest contribution of these startups to the Jordanian economy and population?
It's very much digitizing all of the services in the country. So just trying to create a digital economy. That's been a big driver of what we've seen coming out of the startup activity.
I see. I've been to Amman 4 times, and I was super impressed by the skill level of the workers and by how open they were to startups and how everyone kind of had an idea of starting something.
It's less of a bubble in Jordan than elsewhere because everyone's now familiar with the startup ecosystem. Sometimes it feels like you're in a bubble when you're startups. Everyone in traditional industries is not familiar with what's happening in the tech space or in the startup space. In Jordan, there's a lot more engagement and interaction between our large and traditional corporates and industries with the startup ecosystem.
I see. Thank you so much, Rasha. I appreciate it. Second, I'm going to ask Dashne, what do you think is the importance of startups? Because in Takween, you're working on accelerating startups here, right?
Yeah.
In Kurdistan and Iraq. So why? Why is that important?
Before going to that topic or getting there, I wanted to mention that the Iraqi ecosystem is quite new. It's very, very new, and our accelerator, our startups are not at a stage where we can compete internationally or we can compete it to Jordan and the rest of the neighboring countries. But even with that, we see a great amount of impact and contribution from the startup ecosystem to the whole economy and to the whole Iraqi environment in general. One of the contributions of startups at the moment is they're innovative. Their innovative solutions are creating an impact, are making the lives of our people easier.
Exactly.
If you compare it to 2015, if you compare it now to 2015, things have changed drastically, right? They have changed our lives. They have made our life easier. So socially, they are trying to find solutions for the problems that we have. For example, we have startups focusing on healthcare. We have startups focusing on environment, on water shortage, and etc. So as a whole, they are impacting our lives as a social impact. At the same time, they are contributing to the economy in a different way. Again, if we go back to 10, 15 years ago, the destination of every youth graduate was to go to a public sector.
Go to the government.
Right?
Yeah.
And that was like the ideal, and that was where
Well, become a
innovation
doctor,
died.
become an engineer. Yes, that's where innovation died.
Yes.
Innovation goes to college to die, guys. Just so that you know. Yes.
So this is where, as you mentioned, innovation died. But because of the situation in Iraq, generally, the economy at the moment, people started doing solving problems and then creating businesses to solve those problems. We see a different market. We see a diverse market. Instead of people focusing on governmental, people are right now thinking of, okay, I have a way of, instead of working for the government, I can work for a
company,
startup.
freelancer.
I can think outside the box. I can be an entrepreneur. I can have an entrepreneurial mindset, and that actually works.
I see.
So that's one of those. And one more thing I wanted to mention was, locally we see this difference, but internationally we also see that. I wanted to tell you a story that happened to me this summer. I was meeting an investor, which was completely not related to Iraq, not related to startups, and who was introduced to me by an American investor. And this investor was Canadian, 100% Canadian. I sat with him, I told him, hey, I'm from Iraq, from Kurdistan in particular. He said, oh, I know. I said, have you been? He said, no, but I have invested in a startup in Iraq, in Kurdistan. I was completely shocked because I didn't know that he would even know what Kurdistan is. It was, we were in Canada, we were talking about it. It was such a great privilege to know that the Iraqi market has come to a point where we have interest from international investors. And I didn't mention, yes, the startup
You're
that
talking about Kamal, right?
Yes.
From Loyal VC.
Yes.
So Kamal, Loyal VC was one of our investors who co-invested with Russia last year. They're a Canadian investment firm, and we were there for Russia and for them. We were the first Iraqi startup for them to invest, and that's an honor for us because that was introducing them to the Iraqi market and telling them, look, we have youth, we have startups, we have opportunities here that you can invest in, and I'm just proud. Thank you for telling that story. It's an honor. All right. I also want to mention from Ustad Ahmed Shagra, you have been through multiple startups, but here and in other places, right?
Yeah.
I want to ask you this question, and then you can tell me what you think. Is startup a factory of skills and leaders that can contribute to the economy? You go through this factory, you put people through startups, and then out comes skilled, leader, innovative people.
Well, I think that's if it's done correctly, then yes. Like if a startup is led by highly energetic people who are there to learn, and a really good example of this is something called the PayPal mafia. So there's a website called PayPal. It's now a full-fledged fintech infrastructure, right? So that's used for online payments. It's something similar to what you'd imagine FIB does here in Kurdistan or something in Iraq overall. Now, the PayPal mafia went on to lead, and it was co-founded by Peter Thiel, who's like a magnate of industry, Elon Musk. Most of you have heard that name. The guys who created LinkedIn, and the list keeps going on and on. The same small group of people that created PayPal then went on to become titans of industry and innovators and investors and VCs. So, the same kind of applies to what happened with Kareem, right? So, the Kareem guys, a lot of them went on to lead other startups in the region, spanning from Pakistan all the way even to the States. I'd say the same kind of was about to happen with the Souk acquisition. Maktoub probably applies to that because Ronnie and the guys actually graduated from the Maktoub experience and then they went on to do other stuff. So yes, startups, if they're done well, and that probably falls like a lot of that weight, first of all on the founders, then on the investors, and then on the ecosystemic players like Takween and Flat 6, right? Where
they come in with a lot of knowledge and expertise. They can bring in from other parts of the world to help educate Iraqi founders. Like I had to lose a lot of my hair to learn how to do a startup, hopefully properly. It could be some of the beautiful sets of hair that I see in front of you that don't have to go through that process with the help of people like Rashan, yeah, and Nishni, right? So that's what I hope for. I hope to see startups become something that is common, and to see more startups, people who do startups correctly, even if it fails, become leaders of the economy. And that's important.
So you're saying not just anyone taken through a startup journey will result in that good outcome. The person has to have something to begin with, you know, some logic, some smartness, and will need help from accelerators, investors, leading them, teaching them, in order for that, what I mentioned, to happen, which is creating those logical
like innovation or invention. Today I was walking by and I saw Kurdistan, I think the Kurdistan Innovation
KII.
KII, right?
Yeah.
So, and I was introduced to an inventor who's a world innovator in the field of a Kurdish innovator here from I think from Erbil for artificial hearts. Now, innovation is more science than art. Innovation does have rules. It is rooted in complexity theory, and very dry academic stuff. But it is definitely more science than art. So this is where I believe what you said is correct. We do need to educate on how to do a proper startup, so that people who go through that process exit the startup, success or failure, as leaders of industry.
Here, this is a very important point, and I want to make it 2 points for people. The first point is, I think people here maybe have been bored of hearing topics about tech startups so much. They say, oh, it's again tech startups, tech startups. I've heard this panel 10 times, I've seen this video 10 times. But it's actually, I think one of the important points why it should be mentioned so much is this exact point. Because it's not being done right in Iraq. I believe that it's not being done right in Iraq with the people that, well, first they say entrepreneurship. They say I'm an entrepreneur. But entrepreneurship actually is any business. Anyone who starts a business, whether classic, normal, or tech startup, is an entrepreneur. Now, mixing that with tech startups is a mistake, because you could start a restaurant and you're an entrepreneur. You can start a candle making business and you're an entrepreneur. So when some people see these people calling themselves entrepreneurs and then mentioning tech startups and connecting them in their head, they're like, oh, so should I just go start making candles? Should I just start a restaurant? Is that what you mean? But that's actually not what we mean here. And what Ustad Ahmed is talking about is doing tech startups in the right way results in startups like Replit. I'm super, super proud of Replit, and I'm very impressed. Replit started in a friend's office. He didn't have an office, you know, in Amman, in Jordan, by the way. He's from Jordan. He didn't even have an office. He was staying in his friend's office to create it. And now it's $1 billion company funded by YC, and they moved to San Francisco. This is an amazing story. Someone in Amman, or in Erbil, let's say, or in Baghdad, starting a startup on his computer, in his friend's office, because he doesn't even have an office, and then building it to $1 billion company with hundreds of employees in San Francisco in the US. Now that is a tech startup done right. That's what you can do with tech startups, and that's what we're here to advocate for and inspire and talk about, right? Thank you, Ustad Ahmed. I appreciate that. Okay, now that we know how important tech startups is and how they lead to, you know, skills, innovation, solving our problems like Miswag, Lezu, IQ Cars, all local startups, you know, like 1001, Padash. We're going to talk about how to start a startup. If you want to start a startup, how to start it. So I'm going to go to Mateen. You're a startup founder, and you're running it now. What do you think? How should one start a startup, and how should they go about it?
Well, I would like to add something to what you previously mentioned. A lot of people start startups. They jump right onto like building something, like a product. What I think is there is a period where you, there's a period where you get to where you decide you start a startup, and then there's after that which you start working on the startup. And we jump onto building startups right away because we don't know anything about most of the time people. What we know is a little bit, and what we don't know is an ocean. It's been my third year in entrepreneurship. I still find myself like, I still go blank. I don't know what to do. Things happen every day. And then I realized like, maybe my job as a founder is more is about solving problems. Maybe it's like, there's, like I try to learn new things every day because now I know there's a lot that I don't know. So when we start a startup, it's not just an idea that we say it's this is going to work. We have to validate our ideas. I mean, when we say this thing is going to work, it's just an assumption. Like in life, everything we say is an assumption, like until we validate it. So how do we come up with good ideas that's worth doing is very important. And sometimes we say, there's nothing for me to do. There's no, everybody did, like people are doing everything. Like this happened, I remember Jack Ma, he visited the US and he saw everything. He said, there is nothing for us to do. And then he went back to China. He invented one of the biggest e-commerce companies. And from there, China grew to create innovative products, innovative startups. So when we don't have good ideas, we should like look for problems, look for anomalies. Like it's not always new ideas. It's sometimes somebody is not doing something right. We can provide a solution to doing that right. So we can do that. And then we have to know that starting a startup...
Sorry, you're saying before we say, you're saying when we say start a startup, we don't mean go code and build a product. Don't do that. That's not the first step.
Exactly.
You're saying the first step is researching
exactly
your idea, validating,
exactly
testing it before building anything.
Exactly.
So the test.
So that's where, like, that's when we talk about the building a startup, the methods are there. Like we are like they're teaching it in accelerators, incubators, but before that, there's a lot like. Not everybody can handle the pressure of a startup. Not everybody can handle the level of problems that are throwing at you every day. Like sometimes we say, let's just give up. And if you don't have a good enough reason to start your startup, you're gonna give up like very easy.
So that's another question. That's before how to start a startup. Do you want to start a startup? Should you start a startup?
Exactly.
So,
and if you should, why you should? Why you should do this? Why you should pursue this this idea?
All right, guys. So first, ask yourself: can I start a startup? Should I start a startup? And if I want to, why? Why should I start a startup? And then, if they say yes, they have to research this question, by the way, because it's a bit more detailed. But if you say yes, then Mateen is saying research and validate the idea.
Exactly.
And then you start a startup.
Exactly. And then there's methods like what's common among startups, the lean startup. It's you have to learn how to do it. Let me give you like our story. In 2021, when we wanted to start the Fair Academy, I started because I did not really know how to code the whole website and everything. I started to asking companies, like software development companies, how to, like, if they could do it for us. Like, there was one company who said, like, I would do it for you for $60,000. And then there was one who said, I would do it for like $30,000. We did not have that money. Like, I could not even imagine, like, where can I bring this money? Just for the product. And then there's, like, I believe in life, when you think about something, it will come to your life and all this law of attraction. I started, like, I was listening to a podcast. He was talking about the lean startup and MVP, and he said you can create an early version, very buggy version, not all the features, just test it out. And then I started following, like, what is this lean startup? Then I found the book, The Lean Startup. I read the book. We created the first version of Fair Academy for $500. I'm not sure even if it was $500. I didn't have the money at the moment. I asked my brother, because we co-founded with my brother, Ahmed, he's there. I asked him, like, we need a theme, WordPress theme, for this website, which was $60. We need some plugins, which was like, the whole thing was costing us $300, $400. Then we had a platform that was ready for people to use. Yeah, to use. Yeah. Then from there, everything else happens, which we were not expecting. A lot of issues, a lot of things that we didn't expect to happen, and the rest.
$60,000 to $500.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how you started.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you, Kaka Mateen. He's right. It's actually how it's similar to our story as well. I mean, 3 years ago we started Cordivia. Cordivia was a live trivia game that came on at 9 p.m. and people were playing. We had 1.5 million downloads, and at some point we had 800,000 monthly players that were playing the game. And we started that with $2,000. And we didn't even spend the whole $2,000 before reaching revenue and making money. So, and by the way, Cordivia, just so that you know how we started it, was a totally copy-paste idea. It was not innovative. We didn't come up with it. We were like, okay, we want to start a startup. That's where we started. We're like, we want to start a startup. What has worked outside? This was our approach, by the way. What has worked outside? We looked at the world and other startups, and we saw, I mean, my co-founder Umar saw that HQ Trivia was in the US, and we just copy-pasted that and made it Kurdish in Kurdistan. That was how it came about, by the way. We made a lot of changes to it based on the demands here and what people wanted here, and we, had added stuff, removed stuff. But that was basically how we started. And by the way, we pivoted away from that because it was not working. A lot of people ask me, why did you shut down Cordivia? Because it was not making money. I was losing money every month. It was not making money. We had to shut it down. Startups have to be profitable and make money. It's a business at the end of the day. I mean, sure, Uber's story is that they burned billions of dollars but that's market acquisition and it's a whole different story. But for us, it was not making money, and we pivoted to coupons, and then we pivoted to Padage that we're working on now, which is food delivery.
I just want to add that at the beginning, when we test something, when we have an assumption, we say we are sure that this is going to work. Like with founders, we say that. But the chances to fail is usually higher than the chances of success. Because I was reading in this book recently, like we don't visit graves a lot, so we don't see the graves, the people that are dead. We always, like, for example, we come to these panels, we see Padage succeeding, we see 1001 succeeding, and then we say, it must be easy. Let's do it. And we don't see a lot of, exactly. I mean, the data says 90%,
something like that.
Something like that. It fails, like in the world, like every year. So we don't look at the failing chances. We only go with the.
Are you motivating them to start a startup, or are you demotivating them to start a startup?
Well, I say do it. Just do it right, as everybody else says.
So you're saying just be aware of the failure
exactly.
rate. Guys. Okay, the failure rate is high.
My goal is to show them the real side of startup business, like starting a business. And sometimes we just say it's easy, and we just talk about the good numbers and the good days that we have. We don't talk about the bad days. I'm sure you had a lot of bad days.
A lot of tears and sweat.
Exactly. So I don't want to demotivate anybody. It's just a fun journey. I will do it every time, like hundreds of times, if I failed. But it's like you should do it right.
Yeah, but the hope here is, guys, you can pivot. You can learn. I mean, when Russia invested in us last year, we were working on a totally different product. And then one day I just sat with Russia online. I'm like, Russia, we're shutting down this idea. We're going to work on an entirely different idea. And by the way, before we had that meeting, we were sitting with the co-founders like, what is Russia going to say? They just gave us money. What is going to be their reaction saying, oh, we're not going to be working with this anymore? We were stressed, okay? And then I told Russia, okay, we're not going to work on this anymore. Russia was like, okay, what are you working on next? I was like, wow, so you're okay? She was like, yeah, if you have a better idea, let's work on it. Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, and she told me something this morning that this really gives me hope. She was like, we focus on and care about those founders who don't give up, not about who try different things. They don't just keep trying on one thing that's just not working. 1 month it's not working, 6 months it's not working, 2 years it's not working, and they just keep at it. That is a hopeless case. A hopeful case is a founder tries something, doesn't work, throws it away, tests, tries something else, doesn't work, throws away, tests again, and is willing to change and test new things. That's what really matters. Right, Rasha? This is what you were mentioning as well this morning.
100%.
Yeah, so start, test, validate, you fail, you change, totally normal, try something else. But that process of finding the gem is beautiful. It teaches you a lot, it's really addicting, and I recommend it to everyone. It's been the best 3 years of my life working on this and pivoting and changing and just trying to find something that works. All right, moving to the third topic. Key problems with startups in Kurdistan and Iraq. Okay, so there are people who have started startups. Maybe some of you here have startups. What are the key problems that we see that we think you should avoid or that you should work on fixing? First, I'm going to ask Ahmed Shagra. Saad Ahmed, you have invested in a few startups, right?
Yes.
You have worked on a few startups. So you have the perspective from an investor and you have the perspective from a startup founder.
Yes.
What do you think about this?
Well, like, so what you mentioned is I have failed maybe 6 or 7 times over the past 10 years. Yeah, I have a lot of scar tissue. So we had a couple of wins. That was also good. And some of the investments none of the investments I've had in Iraq have actually materialized in a full scalability yet. Now that is something that I spend a lot of time speaking to founders about. Now I also would like help startups when I can, like founders. The way that I go to
that is true. He has helped me before, guys. I vouch for that.
Whenever I can. So I'd say that there are kind of two things, right? So first, we did some research with the American University of Sharjah. It was part of the Iraqi public policy leadership program. So we did a 6-month kind of study on the startup ecosystem to identify where there are opportunities for government to change policy, for instance. Now, one of the biggest issues is that setting up a company in KRG and generally in Iraq is not a straightforward process you can do easily, cheaply. Like, it is easier for an Iraqi founder to set up a startup in Estonia than it is to do it in Iraq. Just plain and simple. The same applies to Amman, by the way. Like, one of the biggest success stories in the past 2 years is probably Maqsim, right? Fuad Jarius. He started off with an Estonian corporate registration, CR. So we have a regional issue that governments still haven't figured out that we don't care about whatever red tape you have. We will operate online without you, and that's a major thing that they need to understand. The second thing is I'd say it's easier to make money by burying your money. Burying, yeah, it's a term. تدفن فلوسك, right? So it's buying land is more profitable than doing startup.
You mean for local investors here?
Yeah.
Doing like property is
like, okay, if we have two or three, I know at least 1 or 2 millionaires in the room, right? So it is easier for them to put money in the ground, buy real estate in Yarmouk or in Bakhtiari, and make a profit, than to put it in a startup.
That's true. They haven't seen a success story yet.
And it's easy, right? So Saudi did something smart with that. They put a special tax on al-aradi al-bayda. They call them white land. So if you're hoarding land just to see its price rise over time, they tax you double or triple after 3-4 years. So they thought, okay, we need this capital to flow.
Come out of land and into the economy.
Exactly. So revive the capital. But the other thing that I'd say also is that our culture is still not used to high risk. Right? So in Iraq, in Kurdistan, and by the way, Kurdistan isn't very unique in that. If you take Sultanate of Oman, Kurdistan, and Amsterdam and the Netherlands, they have very similar there's a similar arc in culture between these three environments, even the way they came to exist. So by spending time in the GCC, I find the culture in Erbil and in Muscat very similar. Like, the undertones are ridiculous. It's one of the only 2 cities in the world that I've been to that use the flasher to give way are Muscat and Erbil. I don't know how polite they are. These are 2 of the most polite cities I've ever been in. Because everywhere else, it's like, get out of my way, you know? It's like, it's aggressive. The majority here in Erbil, it's polite. So from a startup point of view, we're still not used to encouraging our loved ones to go out, stick their neck out, and maybe get crushed.
Parents are against startups.
Yeah, it's like, oh, go get a government job. We have employees in Al Fawahid who have a government job.
لا. And how do they work for you?
Extremely well, but with low risk. I mean, they come and they say, look, my parents said if I don't do a government job, I'm not allowed to, خلاص, I'm not allowed to, they'll kick me out. They have a government job that they do a couple of hours. They probably don't even do it. They just pay off a guy who signs in for them. And they work for us. And we're adapting to it. And that's the other thing. Again, government, wake up. Like, if you want to encourage people, they can look to countries like Oman. They did this. They're like, okay, you can take 5 years off. And we do have that in Iraq, right? So you're allowed to take a paid or non-paid a couple of years leave to encourage people to, move out of the public sector. So, look, in Iraq, it's an ecosystemic level problem. This is nascent. We're still new. Founders also, just everyone founders, for the sake of Russia, okay? This is for Russia. I'm going to say what she's not going to say. If you keep saying Iraq is this many billions and I will retire after I'm done with my startup in Iraq, you included, then you're wasting everyone's time. Startups are designed to be regional or international. That's where the money is. So if someone comes in, correct me if I'm mistaken. So if someone comes in, and I'd like to hear your opinion on this, by the way, because it's critical to what we talk about. If you come in and say, oh yes, I have a brilliant startup idea for Iraq only, you're really not using what startups offer you, which is scalability. And this is something that I'd say to add to what you were talking about. The definition of a startup must include the ability to scale without physical constraints. Like, you're not bound by something that locks you in. That is what a startup is. It can grow without physical limitation. So, like, if I could shift it over to Rasha, because I don't want to hear, like, why do you think it is that we have this obsession about Iraqi economy, and is it good or bad for startups to have that opinion?
Someone on the panel before us was saying solve for local problems, and that's fine, but if you're solving for local problems, you're just not right for the venture capital industry. So I think what we differentiate is, we always tell people scale, 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 and I always say it's for you to decide what kind of business you want to run. Not everyone wants to run a business that scales cross-border. Maybe you want to run a business that makes you sufficient money to live comfortably in your country. That is fine. Just don't go after venture capital money if that's what you're after. If you are going after VC money, then it does need to be a problem that solves for bigger than your country, even if it's a country like Iraq, which is a much bigger market than the 3 other countries I invest in. So you do need to be building for, we say not even regional, build for global solutions, build for international solutions, because that's what tech allows you to do. So we actually discourage anyone that says, I'm creating a product unique for the market. And I think someone said something about lower quality being more acceptable in Iraq and the Kurdish region. We had that sense of entitlement in Jordanian startups years ago, where I'm a startup, so support me. You're meant to support startups, regardless of whether the product was good or bad. We once used an events company in Jordan for registering our startups, and I was using it as a client, as a customer, as a paying customer, and the service was bad. And when I mentioned it, she said, but you're meant to be supporting startups. But I'm a customer who expects a quality product. And so you should not be building something like, this is good enough for Iraq, or this is good enough for Jordan. Do try and focus on quality and building products that would be as relevant in other markets.
But guys, if I may add, this is a problem that we have at Padash, okay? So Padash currently is built for Iraq right now. The final model that we figured out is a model that we can apply currently to Iraq only, and maybe to some other Middle Eastern countries that don't yet have the noon level of delivery, or the ninja and na'na' level of delivery in Saudi. The problem with this is, Ustad Ahmed, is the way we reached this solution was by investigating the Iraqi market and living in the Iraqi market and working in the Iraqi market for 3 years. Kurdistan and Iraq. This is how we found this unique solution that fits, that has a product market fit, the market being Iraq. So we do have that problem. Okay, yes, it can work in Saudi as well, especially in their satellite cities, not Riyadh. Excluding Riyadh, it can work in any other city in Saudi. So we still have that option. But I think it's okay if it meets a huge need in Iraq. For example, Miswak, I think Miswak is an Iraqi startup and is built for Iraq. And yeah, it can scale to other countries, but I think because of the majority of their people and their vendors and buyers and everything is in Iraq, it's virtually impossible for them to go to Saudi with all the competitors existing in Saudi, or go to UAE with all competitors existing in UAE that have already captured that market.
And I think we shouldn't limit it to the UAE and Saudi. I think where a lot of mistakes happen, we see with startups, is thinking that our region is the UAE and Saudi. These are saturated markets. They're quite developed. There's a lot already happening. The world is so much bigger than those two countries, and even in the global south. So I think part of the mistake is all of us, because all of our region with the smaller markets and Iraq, think my country's first, next step is Saudi. There is a different route before you get to Saudi.
That's true, but I think it's mostly because of the Arabic, the language, the culture, the familiarity, the closeness. I mean, that's why people
There's sufficient differences that the Arab world is not really one. When people say there are, I don't know how many million Arabs speaking, the Arab world is not one geography. It's not like Europe. But getting into Saudi is just as hard for an Iraqi as it is for a Dutch. Each market is uniquely different. Each market requires you to register in that country. Each market has its own rules and regulations. And so I think part of the mistake is also thinking of the Arab world as an Arab world, and I can scale across the Arab world. And probably getting into Saudi is just as hard as getting into a country.
Then how can you build a startup that scales across other countries?
So
I'm just saying it doesn't have to be Saudi.
Yeah, I think what I latch on to what Rasha said. We actually had a success in that, and we faced what she was talking about. So Nedros, it was a courseware marketplace that we did back in.
What was the name? Sorry.
Nedros to study together. Nedros.com, right? So what we did at the time, it was an Arabic courseware marketplace, similar to what you guys are doing now, but it's slightly different back then. So we did expand into Saudi. It was an online service, so we were selling in Saudi essentially because it's credit cards, right? So we didn't care.
Saudi today is very different than Saudi 5 years ago.
10 years ago. This was 10 years
5
ago,
years
right?
ago.
Yeah.
So moving into countries, I think it's basically the Saudi money, right? It's because like Saudis and Audis. It's like you hear Saudi and you hear cha-ching with it.
Cha-ching, yeah.
It's funny money, like you look at it. It's a company with a lot of it's a company. That's an interesting thing. It's a country with a lot of extra cash, right? So, but I agree with what Rasha is saying. Like for us, Al Fawahid, when we look at our future, we see North Africa as the most likely thing. Yes. And what I'd say, look, there's a really interesting term. First, to comment on what you said, in the literature of startups, right? You want to read Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. You do start with a Normandie. You start with a small place that you're protected in, that you can launch and survive in. You don't want to have a massive Kareem hanging over your shoulder, or a massive Netflix. Like us in Iraq, we're doing streaming. We're not worried about Kareems of the Netflixes of the world, because this is our market. We walk in, we walk out, we have conversations by phone and in person that they cannot have in Iraq. And it's about enabling a narrative. And this is the universal thing about startups when you look at it from a founder's point of view. So there's a narrative that Padash is currently doing, right? A narrative. There's a story in someone's life that Padash is enabling. Someone needs to get the ingredients for a cake before their yeast goes bad.
Or before their guests go away.
Exactly. They got a call, your aunt is coming, you need to make food available now, go. So that's a narrative, and that's a universal narrative, right? That applies to Algeria, it applies to Egypt, it applies, and God forbid, applies to Saudi. The idea here is that you do start with it. You can start with Suli, you can start with Ankawa, right? This is not about city or country, but if you enable a human narrative that crosses cultures and boundaries, then you have a scalable startup.
So it's not just the model or the product. I could change the model, but the narrative and the story is that universal.
That is the universal element of startups, and that's the abstraction. So this is the geek in me now, right? So it's like art. The less details you have, the more narratives it enables. The more features you add, the broader the scope of narratives, right? So one narrative, many people, versus a lot of narratives for a lot of people.
Can I just add a clarifying point? When we're talking about going into Saudi, it differs if you're running a B2C or a B2B startup. And if you're running a SaaS business for enterprises or small businesses. So B2C is much more transferable to other countries than when we talk about B2B. We invested in a startup out of Baghdad called Andalusi. It's a B2C startup. It's basically Canva.
Canva for Arabic,
And 80% of their revenues come from Iraq, from Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
It's much easier to do Saudi when you're B2C. And also if you're a B2B SaaS that's cloud-based, that doesn't require much onboarding time, it also becomes easier to do multiple markets. Where we say it's harder to think about Saudi is when we're talking about B2B that requires in-person sales in the field, and then that's much harder to penetrate.
They have different regulation, different needs, different operations in
Yes, I
Saudi,
just wanted
everything.
to add that clarifying point. It does depend on your business model, how hard it is to scale
All
out
right.
of your country.
If I may,
Yeah.
depends on the business model as well as the exit strategy of the business. If your goal, if let's say a startup doesn't want to go international, wants to be acquired by an international company, they can focus on Iraq, make it very, very strong, and then wait for a third party or an international unicorn to come and
Who's
acquire
acquired
that
Saudi and is eyeing Iraq, and you have prepared Iraq for them, and they just come
Exactly. You have
acquire you.
all the
That's kind of our
logistics.
strategy for Padash for now. Okay, Mateen, over to you. As a startup founder here in Kurdistan, what are the main challenges you think startups are facing and the mistakes that they're making?
Well, of course, there's a lot of issues. I can directly say funding, but I don't want to say that because there's a lot of other things that we should...
Steps before funding.
I mean, something like we have said funding a lot, so that everybody's saying it's funding. We have problem with funding, but when you look into it, sometimes the problem is not funding. I mean, maybe for us, the problem, we could use money to expand, maybe you could use it to do something. But when you look at it, sometimes, most of the times, there's other issues. I mean, in Kurdistan, for tech startups, the infrastructure is a huge problem. Like when you, let's say we are doing this in a different country, in the US, in the Europe, everything is ready for you to set up.
Much easier.
Exactly, and you don't have to fix a lot of things manually to make your startup work. I mean, here you had to think about the payment methods because even a few years ago, FIB did a great work. Like it solved the issue, did a great job solving it.
But penetration is still low. Still
Exactly.
10%.
This is just one of the problems for FIB as well. But we still had to integrate, like we should have a cash payment.
Yes.
So cash payment and then...
For Academy, that's a nightmare because it's an online learning
Exactly.
platform.
So we had to provide cash payment as well. And then I think for us the biggest problem was the IT literacy among the people. I mean, it was not like create the app, publish it, and say people just use it. We had to go through the customer education, the whole journey of customer education. Like, what is the platform? What is it doing? People didn't know about like how to do courses, how to register. I mean, people didn't even some of them didn't even know the how to use emails. So these were like challenging for us a lot.
Yeah.
And then different issues are like the region. The whole region is...
Before you go to the region, I want you to talk about specifically what mistakes the startups are making rather than what are the challenges they're facing in the community.
I mean, let's say we need funding. What are we going to do with the funding? This is very important if we know what are we going to do with funding. Sometimes you can do it in different ways. We usually, the founders, they don't know the whole process of how to go with the startup, how to do it, and they think that if they pour some money into it, it will fix the problem. But of course, you see, that's a big issue they have. Yeah. So misconception about funding and startup challenges is a big thing here.
Yeah.
We
Actually,
have
sorry, I was doing this mistake last year, guys. And I'm gonna admit this publicly. I was talking with Mateen last year. Do you remember? I was like, the biggest problem is that there's no funding. We don't have money. If only we had an investor, all our problems would be solved. We have found the perfect product. This was a year ago, after we raised from Flat Six Labs. This was between raising from Flat Six Labs and now. There was a time where we really needed money to scale the model that we had. But lo and behold, 6 months later, we've changed that model entirely. We've found a completely different thing that works much better. And now it's much easier for us to raise. We couldn't raise, so we were forced to find a better way, a better product to make it work. And actually our problem was not funding. If we had gotten funding, then it would have forced us to continue on that sakat, wrong product, and we would have never been here today. And now I realize, wow, our problem was actually not funding. Our problem was the model. It was not making money. Be honest with yourself. Have you built something that people want, that people use? Is it making money? And investors were telling us, okay, are you successful? Are you making money? And in my head, I'll say, bro, if I was making money, why would I want your money? I'll just use my money. If I was making money, if I was successful, why would they raise from you? But it's actually a justifiable question. Ustad Ahmed, you have invested in startups as an angel.
Yes.
Is that a justifiable question for an investor to ask?
It is, but I'd say it's not the only question to ask, right? So it's hard to talk about what questions to ask. I'm going to speak as an angel as opposed to VC, just so that I don't step on.
Yeah, it's different.
All the respect to Flat Six, right? So as an angel, we look at startups in a slightly different way. The term angel is used because it's a very flattering term. Where we come in, where sometimes there isn't even a product. There's just a really, really awesome set of founders.
They have a background and a strong.
Right. So what we usually ask is, how do you know each other as founders, the founding team? Are you a single founder? Do you have technical? And this is to comment on what Mateen said. If you don't know tech, Allah don't do it.
Yes.
Just please, يعني حق الآلهة, right? Just don't do tech startup if you don't know tech.
If you don't know how to code, or if you don't have a co-founder.
Yeah, or a co-founder who knows how to. If you don't know how to meet people who know how to code, like if you don't have a friend who has a relative who knows a guy who knows how to code, just don't do it. But usually that's what we say, and we ask about. I try to get into the three core questions: is what happened in the world to make you think this is going to work? Because there's a narrative, right? The world was one way, something happened, now it's different. Describe that to me in those terms that justifies you now presenting something that's going to work. And your founders, and like, why do you think this is big? So if those questions lead to something that I believe is meaningful, like I don't know, college buddies, one of them is really good at tech, identified something, a shift in the market that they identified that other people haven't.
Change in regulation, shift in behavior.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, exactly. It's like something, like in Iraq, for instance, private education became so big at this point that congestion is going to happen and consolidation in the market. So maybe they do an edtech SaaS product that's going to take on, like help consolidate or whatever, standardize. So the consolidation.
Don't we have an Iraqi edtech?
We have a couple.
What's the name? Corsi?
There is Corsi. I'm going to be seeing them tomorrow. Mustafa.
They've reached 500,000 users. I think.
They have. So those are interesting, right? Interesting situations. And Abwab you have from Amman, who are operating very successfully in Iraq. You have a couple of different startups in EdTech, for instance. So for an angel, like when you speak to an angel, we do sometimes, if you're mature enough to have revenue, maybe you should be talking to the good lady next to me. Right?
I have found that it makes it much easier to talk to angel investors when you have traction. So for example, for our case, for Padash, we recently talked with a few investors and it made the conversation much easier, and we might close next week. We might get an investment next week. Yeah. How? Why? Because when I talk to the investor, I'm like, okay, this time I have a block, I have a part of the city where the app is working. And when I mean working, it's making more money than I'm spending on it. So there's a margin of profit on that circle. It was a 1 kilometer radius in the city of Erbil. That was working.
That's brilliant.
Right? So there's a 1 kilometer radius.
That is a Normandy, right? So if you read online, if you see what is a Normandy in startups, That's the one. I'm going to document this. Like, I want to talk to you later.
We will talk it later. So that kilometer was working, and I'm like, okay, now imagine copy pasting this kilometer all over Iraq, over thousands of kilometers. This is what we want to do. It was like, I'm in.
Yes.
So this is what I mean. So until you find that 1 kilometer of yours, it's going to be very hard with investors unless you have a very strong background, like you have been the CPO of this 1001, or you've been working with Miswak, or you were the early employee in Miswak and you've been there for a few years, you know how a startup is run, and now you're gonna start your own thing, right, Ustad Ahmed? You know, you see someone like that, you get excited. You're like, this guy knows how to do stuff.
Absolutely.
He knows startups.
Yeah.
Boom, there you go.
Yeah.
All right, I think we've approached the end of our panel.
I'd like to add something to the challenges. Russia also mentioned the mentality and the mindset we have here among entrepreneurs. Sometimes we just do the bare minimum and we expect great results. We just think locally. Even if we can push it a little bit farther, we don't do it. Like I've been, like this year I've been to different exhibitions in the US, in Qatar, in UAE. What I saw there, the level of perfection, the level of dedication of these startups, it was mind-blowing. Like I cannot even compare it to the biggest companies here in Iraq. In
They
Kurdistan.
think globally. They think billions.
Exactly. So the level they do things, like the level of professionalism they do, they don't think this is just for like New York. This is just for US. This is just for China. They compete on a global level, as Ahmed also said. Like we don't need to compete on a local level. We can start with the local level, but then we have to have a global ambition where we want to go. Like we have to see the road how we are going to the global market. And another thing is like the misunderstanding around tech startups. I mean, not just tech startups, startups generally. For example, we work for a year, we don't see profit, we say, this is not working.
It didn't work.
And then we see Uber reaching profitability after 10 years. So we don't know this, like we have misunderstanding about the process of startup, like the steps. I mean, even among the investors, like they don't understand how startups work.
You mean our local investors?
Sorry?
You mean our local investors?
Our local investors. Even, I mean, the whole region, the government, still needs a lot of work to do to make the work easier for startups. You remember when I think you registered your company after the new system.
Yeah, I aged 10 years.
So I did it the old system. So we spent 1 year just registering, and there's not just the process. I mean, the way they talked about the startup, the way they talked about the name, why you do this, why you're choosing this name, how you're going to make money, how you're going to, I mean, because they don't understand.
Q&A?
So this is some other
they're
issue.
giving me a signal. They're saying,
But I'm
we don't have time for Q&A?
Ahmed, if there are female founders in the room, this thing about not thinking big enough, we see more in female founders. There's this natural imposter syndrome, and this is across all cultures for women founders. So just make sure you work against your natural biases of thinking, I can't do this, or someone better is doing this. So just for female founders, do be conscious of this.
All right, we're going to do the Q&A in person after we're done. You guys can come up. You guys are going to be here, right? So you guys can come up to any one of us and ask your questions. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, guys. Sorry, Ustad Mateen. Thank you all for listening. And yeah,